In the glittering heart of Oakridge, two boys lived worlds apart, separated not by distance but by privilege and pain. Julian Cole, heir to a billion-dollar empire, knew nothing of hunger or hate. And Eli, a forgotten orphan across the street, knew nothing else. When fate brings them face to face at a charity gala, cruelty unfolds before the eyes of the powerful. But beneath the humiliation, something unshakable stirs. In Eli's heart, and in the conscience of the man who watched it all happen. The Cole mansion rose like a glass palace against the night sky, every window glowing with warmth and wealth. Inside, chandeliers dripped gold light onto polished marble floors as the city's most powerful gathered for Julian Cole's annual charity gala. Waiters glided past with silver trays, laughter rippled through champagne bubbles, and the air smelled faintly of money and perfume. Julian Cole, 14 and untouchable, stood at the center of it all, his tailored suit sharper than his smirk. He scanned the room with the confidence of someone who had never heard the word no in his life. Across the street, the orphanage remained dark and cold. Its paint peeled, its windows rattled with the October wind. Inside, 13-year-old Eli tightened the frayed laces of his too small shoes. Tonight, the children had been invited to attend the gala, a gesture of generosity, they were told. But Eli knew better. They weren't guests. They were props in someone else's story. He stepped into the mansion's light with trembling hands, his heart pounding as he followed the other orphans inside. Gasps rippled softly through the hall as their worn clothes contrasted against silk gowns and velvet tuxedos. Julian noticed immediately. "Look," he whispered loudly to his friends, eyes locking on Eli. "Did they let the janitor's kids wander in?" Laughter followed. Eli's ears burned, but he kept walking. Later, as Adrian took the stage to speak about compassion and hope, Julian cornered Eli near the dessert table. "So do you even own a bed?" Julian sneered. "Or do rats tuck you in at night?" The group around him erupted into cruel laughter. Eli's throat tightened. He wanted to run, but his feet refused. Tears blurred his vision, but he refused to let them fall. "I may not have much," he whispered, voice steady despite the quake inside him. "But I know how to be kind." For a heartbeat, silence. Then Julian laughed harder, louder, the sound slicing through Eli's chest like glass. Across the room, Adrian watched. He had seen his son mock others before. Teachers, drivers, waiters. But something about the boy's trembling fists and tear-streaked face struck deeper. For the first time in years, Adrian felt ashamed. Hours later, after the music died and the guests left, Adrian stood by the rain-streaked window of his study. Across the street, the orphanage's single light flickered. And there, through the glass and the downpour, Eli stared back at him. Not with hatred, but with a quiet, defiant strength. It was the kind of look that refused to disappear, and one that Julian Cole would never forget. And as Julian's laughter echoed faintly in the back of his mind, Adrian felt a question stirring, one that would soon upend everything he thought he knew. Eli didn't cry that night. He wanted to. But tears, he decided, were for the weak, and weakness was the one thing this world would never forgive. Instead, the humiliation hardened inside him like iron. The next morning, as the city stirred awake, Eli slipped out of the orphanage gates and walked toward the towering Cole estate. At first, he kept his distance, hiding behind the stone wall that separated wealth from want. But soon, he found ways to linger closer, offering to sweep the back alley, haul garbage bags, or deliver groceries for neighbors. Each task paid him pennies, but Eli didn't do it for the money. He did it for the glimpses, the polished cars rolling in, the fountain that sang in the courtyard, the life that sneered at his existence. It wasn't long before Julian noticed. Still sniffing around like a stray dog, Julian's voice dripped with mockery one afternoon as he stepped out of a black SUV. "What's the plan, Eli? Hoping someone will mistake you for a human being?" The words hit like stones, but Eli only lowered his eyes and whispered, "I'm just here to work." Julian laughed and shoved past him. "Work won't change what you are." Each encounter was like this, cruelty met with quiet dignity. And though Julian's words burned, they never broke Eli. If anything, they built something new inside him, a determination so fierce it scared even him. From his office window, Julian Cole watched these exchanges unfold, the son he had raised to dominate, and the boy who refused to bow. At first, he told himself it was none of his concern, but the image of Eli's steady gaze at the gala haunted him. It followed him into board meetings, echoed through empty halls, whispered in the silence of his wealth. Weeks later, Adrian was driving home when he saw a scene unfold on a rain-slick street corner. A group of teenage boys had cornered a smaller child from the orphanage, hurling slurs and shoving him to the ground. Before Adrian could react, Eli was there, thin, barefoot, and unflinching, stepping between the attackers and the boy. "Leave him alone," Eli said, voice shaking but strong. "Or what?" one sneered. Eli didn't answer. He simply stood his ground, taking blows meant for someone else until the gang scattered. Adrian sat frozen behind the wheel, rain streaking his windshield and something hot burning in his chest. It wasn't pity. It was admiration and shame. That night, long after Julian had gone to bed, Adrian stood alone in his marble office. The city lights glittered below, and on his mahogany desk lay a stack of papers. His hand trembled as he reached for the pen, but the signature was already there, his name, on adoption papers, and as the rain began again outside, Adrian realized his life, and Julian's, was about to change forever. Julian had heard the words, but they refused to settle in his mind. Adopted. Son. They echoed through the marble halls like a curse. When Eli stepped through the front doors of the Cole mansion carrying a small, battered suitcase, Julian felt something inside him snap. "This is a joke," Julian spat, watching Adrian kneel to welcome Eli inside. "He's not family. He's a charity project." Adrian looked up, his eyes steadier than Julian had ever seen them. "No, Julian, he's your brother now." The days that followed were a storm Julian couldn't control. At breakfast, Eli sat across from him, silent, polite, grateful. At dinner, Adrian asked about their day, his gaze no longer fixed solely on Julian. It was as if the sun that had always warmed him now shone on someone else. School was worse. Word spread quickly, carried on cruel tongues. "Cole's got a pet orphan now," someone whispered as Julian walked past. "Guess Daddy felt guilty," another sneered. Julian clenched his fists until his nails cut into his palms. He wanted to scream, to lash out, but every time he looked at Eli, the calm way he accepted the insults, the way he helped the staff without being asked, his rage deepened. It wasn't fair. Eli wasn't supposed to belong here. One evening, unable to hold it in, Julian confronted him. "Do you enjoy this? Watching me lose everything because of you?" Eli didn't look up from the book he was reading. "I never wanted you to lose anything, Julian. I just wanted a family." The simplicity of the words infuriated Julian more than any insult could have. Weeks turned into months, and the balance of the Cole household shifted. Adrian spent more time at community meetings, talking about housing for abandoned children, about second chances. Eli became the heart of the home, gentle, patient, quietly changing everything he touched. And then, one crisp autumn night, Adrian called them both into his study. "I've made a decision," he said, his voice firm but heavy. "I'm selling the company." Julian froze. "What?" His voice cracked. "That's our company, our legacy." "It's money," Adrian replied, "and money means nothing if it doesn't build something better. We're going to build homes, schools, places for children like Eli." Julian's world spun. "You're ruining everything for him," he shouted, his voice breaking with betrayal and rage. Adrian's gaze didn't waver. He stepped closer, placing a hand on Julian's shoulder with the kind of calm that chilled more than any anger. "For you both," he said softly. And in that moment, as silence swallowed the room, Julian realized the life he thought was untouchable was slipping from his grasp. And nothing would ever be the same again. The Cole mansion, once a glittering beacon of power, now stood empty, sold to strangers. Adrian, Julian, and Eli carried what little remained of their lives into a narrow two-bedroom house across from the orphanage. Gone were the marble floors and crystal chandeliers. In their place were peeling paint, creaking steps, and the scent of rain leaking through old windows. Julian hated every inch of it. He hated the chipped plates on the kitchen shelf, the way neighbors whispered when they passed, the fact that his friends no longer called. But most of all, he hated Eli, the boy whose arrival had toppled everything. "You ruined my life," Julian hissed one night as Eli quietly folded laundry by the window. Eli didn't respond. He simply looked up and said softly, "Maybe we're building a new one." Julian scoffed, but the words lingered. Weeks turned into months, and resentment hardened into silence. They passed each other like ghosts, sharing the same cramped walls but living in separate worlds. Adrian poured himself into his mission. Plans for orphan schools and homes sprawled across their kitchen table. But Julian refused to see any of it. He wanted his life back. Then, one cold evening, everything changed. Julian was walking home from a late class when a group of older boys stepped out from an alley. "Hey, rich boy!" one of them jeered, shoving him against a brick wall. "Heard you're friends with that black kid from the orphanage." "I'm not," Julian snapped, but the words tasted like ash. "Doesn't matter," another spat. "That's enough to make you just like him." The first punch landed hard. Julian stumbled, fear clawing at his chest. They surrounded him, fists flying, insults slashing through the night, and then a voice. "Leave him alone!" Eli burst into the alley, swinging wildly, shoving one boy back. He took a blow to the ribs, then another, but he didn't stop. He stood between Julian and the gang, refusing to move. Eventually, the attackers scattered into the darkness, cursing as they vanished. Julian stared at Eli, bloodied and breathless, his chest heaving in the cold air. "Why?" Julian whispered. "After everything I did to you, why?" Eli wiped the blood from his lip. "Because you're my brother, and brothers don't leave each other behind." Something broke inside Julian then, not in pain, but in awakening. The hatred, the bitterness, the resentment, it began to crumble. Years later, two men stood side by side beneath the autumn sun, cutting the ribbon on a new orphanage built where the old one once stood. Their names, Julian and Eli Cole, were etched into the stone above the door, not built by wealth, not born of privilege, but forged from pain, forgiveness, and the courage to begin again.